there's lots of super valuable information. So really want to encourage everybody to sign up and join to a location close to where you are located. And with that, let's get started around the Innovator Preview webinar itself. I'm Peter Adams. I'm Senior Director of Product Management for the Ivanti product line that's called Enterprise Service Management, that reflects our ITSM, ITAM, and line of business workflow investment. And today we want to talk about the new things that are coming as part of the 2025.2 release. Give you a heads up, so to speak, as part of the Innovator Preview session. Because it is a heads up, we'll show our standard disclaimer slide here. That we want you to be aware that sometimes Ivanti reserves the right to make adjustments, so to speak, but by and large, again, this is a release that's already starting to roll out, as I'll, go into more details in a second. And so from that perspective, you shouldn't see any big changes coming. So again, we're talking here about the 2025.2 release. As you recall, we did skip our 25.1 release this year because our 2024.4 release, we decided to do the customer rollout in early January into February. And that's why it didn't make sense to do another release earlier this year. But starting with our 2025.2 release, we go back to the quarterly release cycle. In fact, you could say that we are a little bit early on because, again, we skipped the last release. We are a little bit early in the cycle. And that's why, again, preview is almost a misnomer. We've already started to roll out this 2025.2 release, at least in staging environments, last week. Should have updated the slide here. We had another session for the same webinar last week, but again, the rollout has started, and we continue to do this over the course of April and reaching into early May for the last production updates. Right, as you know, we have multiple data centers around the world. We do first the staging upgrade, then a certain period of testing and giving customers chance to adopt the new capabilities, and then we upgrade these production environments. By the way, the product documentation, because again we have started rolling this out in staging, the product documentation has also been published already. So if you go to the documentation and search for ITSM, you should see the 2025.2 information in there under the 2025 folder. Okay, but let's dig into detail what is coming here. And it's going to be a mix of slides and a few areas where we do demos, live demos, one recorded one. So wanted to make sure that you get also an understanding how the enhancements look like, right? As you can see here on the slide, we've invested in various parts of our portfolio, various aspects of our portfolio. User experience and AI are still a very important topic. So there's lots of things, investment that have gone into the user experience modernization. As you know, this is a big work stream that we work on the AI side. A very interesting new use case around incident correlation, but as well investments in other areas. Typically for a release, we have many things that go into it. Sometimes smaller, sometimes bigger. It's not always the same size of investment. So the size of the box basically doesn't mean that it's all equal across different areas. But again, typically we invest in multiple different areas. Now, aside from UX and AI, the big investment in this release cycle was actually around the platform and tech updates. And it says here just fortification and security enhancements, but that actually represents a significant amount of investment that has gone into the platform aspects, right? Whether it's additional changes we made around web script execution or workflow prioritization to provide better performance and even further kind of compartmentalization between different customers, different tenants in the environment, whether it's security enhancements, whether it's compatibility updates. We certainly also want to stay up to date around libraries to make sure we get the latest and greatest and address any kind of potential security issues. So there's a lot that went into this release around the platform, which is difficult to demonstrate. So we won't go into further detail around this too much. But I do want to emphasize that this was a big part of the investments in this release, right? We continued, again, to make our platform better so that you can take advantage of the full flexibility that the platform offers, right? To tailor or further extend the capabilities that we deliver out of the box, right? But let's dig into the key functional enhancements that are a bit easier to demonstrate and to explain, and that will again allow you to draw more value out of the solution. So I'll start out with user experience, and again, this is we shared this before, part of a bigger work stream that spans many release cycles. In fact, if you recall, we started out that investment around the employee side because, again, this affects most users. This is kind of the face of IT or HR towards the employee base, has a lot of impact on the general perception of the solution. So we wanted to address that first. And we delivered here not just the self-service UI, but also other employee-centric experiences around the MS Teams bot that we built out, survey experience, right? And again, we are at the tail end of this, I would say, of that initiative to bring the existing capabilities over. We are still discussing use case feedback with customers. In fact, we just had a session this morning to collect feedback and say, hey, we may have missed the mark, so to speak, where we may have to further build this out. But I think overall we are at the tail end of this initiative, and we actually continue to invest in that area, but then focus a bit more on building out new use cases. So the investment will continue, but again, with a bit more focus on addressing the feedback and then building out eventually new use cases, right, on that new platform. The analyst UI activity is in work. Those of you who I've recently seen roadmap briefings, etc. We talked about it a little bit as well in the last Innovator Preview. That is also in work actively, and we plan to start first customer testing in the May timeframe, so in probably less than a month, initially with a certain group of customers around design partnership, but eventually we'll open this up more and want to expose this. But again, we have a running system of this new analyst UI in work, and you will very soon see a lot more details around it. Very exciting update that we'll do here around the new analyst UI. And then, as we are touching certain areas, we continue to refine our admin experience as well. This is more kind of on the fly. As when we are touching a certain area, whether it's survey creation or self-service UI or analyst UI, we're generally updating the admin experience at the same time as well. But again, all of it with a strong focus on our platform capabilities. All the investment that we're doing here, we want to preserve the flexibility that our platform delivers to you, our customers, to our partners. You continue to be able to build new capabilities. That's something that we want to preserve and emphasize because that's a huge value as part of our product here. But at the same time, of course, we want to use the opportunity to improve productivity, to have a higher engagement, to improve compliance around accessibility, etc. So we'll look at all those aspects, right? This 2025.2 release delivers a number of enhancements around the self-service UI. that do again bring us closer to this end of the equivalency phase, so to speak. Specifically, we have introduced a number of things that were a challenge for customers who had used classic form offering layouts before. This was basically a ability for you to hook in your own custom form, so to speak, as part of the self-service UI, right? And while the new UI was able to deal with basic incident forms and render them in the new layout, if you had built a very complex custom one, at some point this kind of automated interpretation of the form layout, etc., was no longer possible. And so in this release, we give an option for you to hook in, again, these classic form layouts into the self-service UI v3 so that you can continue to use them. Yes, they, again, will show up as designed before. And let me just quickly show you how that looks like here. And I hope I'm still logged in. So if you're launching basically a form offering, does seem to be that I logged out here. Let me bring that up. Okay. So let me start this again. Again, it seems like I was logged out. So again, you're on the self-service homepage. Let's say, for submitting a case or an incident, you had, hooked in your own custom form. It is possible now to kind of basically render that as part of the self-service UI, right? Again, the difficulty here was that if you had built something more complex like this, something custom like this is not working. Let's do it this way, right? With, contextual information showing at the side, etc. We could interpret simple incident form, but for more complex ones, you would almost have to have the new analyst UI builder, so to speak, and we don't have that yet. That'll come. We're working on the analyst UI as we stated, and so eventually you'll have a way to kind of rebuild your custom layouts here in a more modern look and feel, in general for incident forms or HR case forms, etc. But we don't have that option here today, the full form builder. That will come, but while we're working on that, at least you're able now to render the existing forms that you built here in the UI so that you can still serve them while otherwise using the rest of the self-service UI, right? So that was a key enhancement. We are also now able to showcase other custom business objects as part of the My Items area. So these could be, again, either things that are not hooked in by default on our side, or some issue here probably with authentication. So these could be either things that are not integrated by default. You can hook in demands, for example, from our PPM module, right? Or even custom business objects. Both of that is possible, right? And so again, that My Items page offers now the configurability to be able to show that. So we touch about the first 2 points here. The inbound emails one I wanted to show briefly as well here. Give me a second. So if I go to My Items here and click on a specific incident, right? You can see that we're now able to render any kind of email conversations that may have went back and forth between the employee and the IT staff, including images, etc. We are able to render that now as part of the notes section in the My Items area. This was something that was not visible before. We could show basic notes, but not the email conversation. That is possible to show now as part of the notes section in My Items, right? Okay, there's a few other things, again, to further refine the self-service UI v3 capability. we had the import-export capability before, but we are including images and icons that just makes the process easier to transition a certain configuration from one system to another through export and import. We are supporting HTML now in certain areas, and this slide here gives a bit more detail about where specifically. Again, one of the things that we restricted a bit in the new UI is, the area of HTML content display. Before, customers could pretty much put in anything they wanted to, including, iframes even, and images and field labels. And some of that was a usability challenge, right? Some of it was a security challenge. So we did restrict it, now open it up, and we continue to collect feedback about where are the areas where we may have to allow certain things. But we also wanted to make sure we don't run into usability or security issues if you open this up for any HTML tag, right? Some of those can have challenges here, right? And I think we talked about the idea of hooking in custom business objects into my items. Again, you just have to go through the corresponding role here, look at the My Items top level tab that you exposed for the self-service role, and then you can kind of configure to show additional business objects here, right? So again, all in support of enabling you to adopt self-service UI. This is our kind of path forward. We continue to collect feedback around it and refine it. We certainly want to make sure it works for everybody, because again, this will be the basis for future enhancements around the self-service UI, right? But user experience improvements were not just done around the self-service UI. We also continue to fine-tune and build out our dashboard V2 capability. One of the reasons why we do this is because we will use this component also in the future in the new Analyst UI, right? So in the new Analyst UI, dashboard V2 will be the only option. And so we wanted to make sure that we address feedback, but also build in features that are requested. This is, for example, an idea that was pretty highly rated in the community here to be able to clone dashboards. Let me jump to my sandbox here. Let's say you have an existing dashboard, incident dashboard, and you say, oh, I want, let's say, a major incident one. You basically can go here and search for the incident dashboard, and then you'll see here that you see a new clone action button here. You just click that. Of course, you need to come up with kind of a unique name. If you try to save it under the same name, the system will complain. So you say, okay, this should be a major incident dashboard. You save that, and again, then you'll have your dashboard. Of course, the next step then would be to adjust the corresponding widgets here. But you see, these are the same widgets as before. But here, maybe you say, instead of showing all my active incidents, I only show the priority number 1 incidents, for example, right? So you would adjust basically the dashboard, but it's much faster than building it from scratch. Building this out, and again, this was one of the key ideas in the community, which is an area that we certainly always monitor, specifically for the new UX modernization initiative, but also for other areas, right? We continue to look at the ideas in the community to at least to address the top ones. We're not able to address all of them, but this is certainly feedback that we'll always look at. Last but not least, there is an enhancement also around the watch list here, where we, introduced, and I'll close this here, go out and go back to the standard dashboard here. So on the watch list side, you'll see that there's a new way to visualize the watch list, to kind of bulk remove certain items, or all of them if you wanted to. So there's additional ways to interact with the watch list and to clean it up. Of course, the launching part in general, going back to one of these items in the watch list works before, but again, there's some refinement around how we display it and how we allow customers, end users, to clean up the watch list by doing a bulk delete, so to speak. Okay. The last item around the user experience is not something directly in the web UI, but it is an important aspect around the experience overall, and that's our survey enhancements. If you recall, about a year ago roughly, we had introduced our new modern survey module, which again was a refinement around the user experience for these survey capabilities that we have in follow-up of a ticket or of an incident, for example. Many customers are sending out surveys to collect feedback. Back then we introduced a more modern way to configure the surveys. We introduced new survey question types, smiley faces, 5-star system to be able to simplify the surveys and use modern concepts that are commonly used these days. But in this release, we also now allow users to answer the surveys within the email so that they don't have to kind of click a link, launch somewhere, potentially log in, then fill out the survey, right? They can do it right away in their email. And I do have to call out right now, this is supported for only for Outlook and Web Outlook, because we take advantage of a certain in-email application capability of Microsoft. So I do want to call that out. But if you use that as your email client and email system, then you are able to configure the solution so that the user can fill out surveys in the email itself and just click submit. And then the UI again corresponding updates to confirm what the submitted values are, and that applies again to radio buttons, checkboxes, text feeds, etc. So that'll make the friction to answer surveys, will remove friction to answer surveys, and then hopefully increase the survey response rate. That's ultimately what this is about, right? To get employees to answer surveys, right? To increase your response rate. That's all what the entire modernization in the end is about here, right? And this will further help with that goal. And then one more item around experience. Again, this is a minor thing. You are able now to relabel, the line of business live chat areas. If you recall, we introduced multiple domain areas that you can have multiple live chat options, so to speak. Talk to somebody in IT, talk to somebody at HR. But in the end, we also wanted to make sure that you as a customer can modify the labels here to align with your own terminology used in your company, right? With that said, let me move on to the AI portion. AI, as I stated, is of course an important investment area for us, Ivanti, across pretty much all of our product lines. Certainly in the ITSM space, it offers great new opportunities to either automate things that were traditionally not easily automatable, but also to sift through larger amounts of data and then make smart decisions, analyze them, present them, to give customers a chance to make better decisions, right? Or to refine the user experience to make it more intelligent. So there's a number of reasons why we do this. Ultimately, it helps us deliver the value that we want to enable in our customers faster. And again, in this 2025.2 release, we are launching an exciting new capability that takes advantage of this ability to sift through a large amount of data automatically and interpret that properly. This capability is called incident correlation. Some of you may recall that we had started to dabble in that area last year, but wanted to make some adjustments based on early feedback here. And now we are officially launching this capability here. What this is basically, it's the system, as new incidents come into the service desk, the AI looks at certain information in a new incident, like summary, description, and then tries to understand which of the incidents really belong together and are likely connected to the same underlying issue. Let's say you have an email outage, very likely you get lots of incidents coming into the service desk, right? And they are usually not all worded the same way. If the end user submits it through email or through a web UI or, calls the service desk so that the analyst logs the ticket, or whether you have, your own monitoring solution, creating tickets automatically, usually the incidents tend to have different wording. And, here that's why it's important to use AI to be able to really interpret the content of the incident and then cluster the ones that belong together into a single cluster here, right? And so what you see on the screen here is not a list of individual incidents, it's really a list of incident clusters. That's important to understand here. And the lines that you can see basically are reflecting how a cluster grows and shrinks, etc., right? So it reflects the dynamic nature of a cluster, right? Now let me show you how this looks like here. I'll go to this screen here. Give me a second here. Or let me first start here. Let's say you're an administrator. In this case, you could be a service desk agent. You could have other roles, right? And you are able basically to expose this new incident correlation dashboard or incident clusters. You can really name the tab any way you want. You can basically expose that for the role. Now the workspace here is a hard-coded workspace. I do want to call that out. It's not the standard grid view, as you can easily detect for our UI here, but it is basically a custom-built workspace here that you can see. Now, of course, in my test system, it's Monday morning here. There are no new incident that came in recently. All the ones that I had in there last week were submitted last week. So that's why the line is flat. Usually in a real life scenario, you would see the cluster growing over time here, right? But again, in my case, this was created all last week in my demo system. I didn't have a chance to add new ones here today. So what you'll see ultimately, again, is a list of clusters. In this case, I have 3. And when you drill down into an individual one, you see the individual incidents related in that cluster, right? The AI has figured out that, when you say Outlook not working or email down, they're ultimately about the same issue, so to speak, right? And then, that makes it easy to understand that something is going on. There seems to be some issue with Outlook. Very likely you'd see more than 3, but for the purpose of the demo, I only have 3 here. And then you can basically mark one of them as, basically one of them as a parent, right? And then also link the other incidents to the parent, so that you basically can focus on that one parent incident to manage the situation, right? So this is somewhat similar to the master incident concept that we had before out of the box. It's somewhat similar in the sense that you do a hierarchical relationship, but again, this would work no matter what priority there is. We also didn't want to modify the master incident relationship in case you were already using it for certain semantics, etc. So we decided to introduce a new relationship here, a parent-child relationship. But there are certainly similarities between the two in that you basically focus on managing the parent incident, and then the status of the child incidents basically are updated automatically. You don't have to look into those, right? By the way, when the cluster is formed, we look at the impact of the child or all the incidents that are in the cluster and calculate the average impact so that you get a sense of how impactful this is. The category, region, etc., are typically taken from the first incident. But ultimately, you're able to basically manage the cluster of incidents by assigning a parent, creating the relationships, and then focusing on a single incident, right? And you see that parent now reflected here, right? By the way, you are able to also then see the correlated incidents. If you go to an individual incident that is part of a cluster, you're able to see the correlated incidents also here in a tab that we offer that can be added to your tab list here if you wanted to. So that's possible too. Again, ultimately, the value that you get out of this is, you're able to much quicker identify that something is going on instead of relying on word of mouth between analysts, etc. Here you have a screen that shows you right away when something bigger is going on and the dynamic nature of it, right? If more and more incidents are coming in for a certain topic, you'll see that changing over time, right? So the early detection is a big one. A more efficient management of the situation is the second benefit, right? Because you can bulk relate them and then focus on the individual parent incident. And all of that will also, of course, then decrease the length of service disruption, so to speak, right? So you're able to detect it faster, able to handle it faster and more efficiently. That means you're also able to communicate faster and restore the service in a faster way. Of course, if the incidents that come in are indicating that there's a security issue, you're also able to respond to this security situation faster, and that overall elevates your security posture as well. But again, the early detection and the efficient management of it are ultimately the key benefits of this. Now, a few more things that we've enhanced around the AI ITSM area. One is we further built out our AI configuration hub. We added additional, let me jump back here and see whether I can bring this up. This is, of course, integrated into our channel admin UI. You have the AI configuration hub item here. Again, we've added a few more tiles that reflect performance metrics related to AI. There are some enhancements around the configurability here. For example, for knowledge-based creation, you have now the option to select a temperature, which kind of reflects the creativity of the algorithm, right? How much creative nature it chooses in building or writing the knowledge article, right? You can be more conservative, you can be a bit more creative. So there's a number of enhancements we did around the AI configuration hub, which is our central place basically where all the AI TSM configuration happens, right? You can switch them on and off, as you could see from the toggles here, but then also edit the details behind it, right? And then last but not least, an update on instant classification. This is a use case that we had supported before, but we've made some adjustments around how it's implemented to further align it with the other AI TSM use cases. Wanted to make sure that you can use this use case also when you license the AI capabilities through this add-on SKU. So you don't have to go through the full ITSM Premier a premium solution package. You can also use this use case now if you license the AI capability with the add-on SKU. But also, again, this is now part of the AI configuration hub so that you have a single place where you can configure all of the ITSM related topics. And then we made some other background changes around the algorithm, right? In general, we always look at which algorithm fits best to the use case. We do that certainly when we build out the use case. We always evaluate multiple options in terms of algorithms and pick the one that works best, so to speak. But then sometimes, as in this case, we may also refine and leverage the latest and greatest algorithms available, right? So that's the benefit of our offering here, is that you don't have to worry about, the algorithms. You don't have to do the analysis, right? We deliver, that value to you, and we take care of evaluating what's the latest and greatest AI algorithm that we can use in the background here. Again, these are mostly back-end changes. The use case itself, the ability to, predict category, subcategory, service, and the value that you get out of it by, reducing, the percentage of wrongly categorized incidents, or if you use a business rule to automatically route the incident based on the category, it would even reduce the ticket bouncing, so to speak. The values are ultimately the same as before. Again, this is mostly a back-end change, right? Okay, then let's continue with some of the other areas, and I'll go through some of those a bit faster. Again, AI and UX, of course, are the big rock items here. Let's start with integration. So in this release, very excited to announce that we introduce a new Neurons integration configuration screen here, so that we give you, our customers, more control over configuring and enabling this integration, right? Before, much of this required interaction with our SaaS ops team. Now you're able to control this yourself. You can switch on the integration. You can test the connection. You get feedback right away. You can troubleshoot it. It's much more kind of a self-service approach, and you are able now to control which parts of the Neurons integration you work with, and that basically allows you also typically to implement this capability much faster, right? As you're not relying on some external group basically to enable this. So that should certainly have an impact on, again, the speed, how quickly you can build out and take advantage of these pre-built integration options. The second topic is around Entra ID integration. Now, again, if you recall, we had introduced a new version of our Azure ID connector back in 2024.4. Again, prior to that, we had some integration, but it was kind of a custom script-based one. Now it's an official, connector. And we decided to rebrand this to align with the Microsoft terminology, right? Microsoft now calls this Microsoft Entra ID, and we wanted to adjust corresponding terminology as well. So you'll find this now under Entra ID connector. But we did not just update the terminology. We also enhanced the capabilities, whether it's importing organizational unit information, whether it's expanding our filtering options that help you determine which records should go in or not, support of extension attributes. So there's a number of refinements that we've done in that area, and we continue to collect feedback in this area and see whether we need to further tweak and refine this. But again, this is a much more powerful way to integrate with Microsoft Entra ID. In the area of iPaaS, which is really our solution to make it super easy to integrate with third-party systems, we make a slight tweak in how we deliver or distribute our pre-built recipes. If you recall, we have built out a bunch of pre-built recipes that represent common ITSM use cases where third-party systems are involved. For example, if you wanted to integrate with development systems like Microsoft Azure DevOps, so that you can exchange tickets between the ITSM system and a development system like ADO. We pre-build these integration use cases so that you can very easily just adopt them, maybe tweak them, but you have a starting point that allows you to roll out these use cases very quickly, right? In the past, we had a certain mechanism to distribute those to our customers, but we decided to leverage here now the Workato community library, so that it's more easy for admins to basically take advantage of these pre-built flows. Before they had to be distributed into a certain folder and picked up there. It's much easier now to basically offer this as part of the standard community library. You can find a whole set of pre-built workflows there, the ones that we delivered, but also other ones, and you can just use it as a general starting point for any kind of flow that you may want to integrate. It just makes it easier to access these pre-built flows in a single place, whether they're built by Ivanti or by others. And then last but not least, an update on our Neurons bots integration. Of course, this is not a new thing. We had integrations between ITSM and Neurons bots before, but we did some enhancements around integrating that into the service request workflow so that you can leverage bots for full automation, also see some of the results and outcomes, drive the workflow as part of the outcomes, and then basically also see feedback and notes, so to speak. So it's a refinement that makes it easier to leverage bots as part of service request workflow, where it's particularly interesting because that allows you to drive automation. A common use case, but not the only one, is to basically distribute software to a user's device as a response to a request here. And that's a scenario I've created a bit of a video for here. So you can see this is our new self-service UI v3. Basically, you can introduce a category to say, I want to do software distribution through the self-service UI. And the user would basically, pick such a request offering, fill out the corresponding questions. First of all, they would have to pick the device on which the software should be installed, because there could be multiple ones the user owns, right? We need to first know which device to pick. Then the system fills in a bunch of additional things, but ultimately then the user would submit the request so that the software is basically to be installed on the device here, right? That's pretty much all that's needed right now. You can again implement all kinds of intermediate steps, approvals, this and that as part of the workflow. But in this case, in that sample scenario, we basically focused on the software distribution portion of it. So you'll see, first of all, that the corresponding backend request has been created from this requestable offering, from the user submitting corresponding service request. You can see the parameters that were submitted. You can look at the workflow. And you can see here that again, in this case, we do check whether the device has an agent installed on it. So that's the first thing we want to check before invoking any bot. But again, you could expand this kind of pre-built workflow to your own requirements, right? So this could have approvals before. This could trigger other interactions with different groups if needed. For tracking licenses or just logging, that kind of request in other areas. And again, this is all based on the ability to leverage Neurons bots as part of a quick action here, which again then can be used in the service request. So, ultimately this goes back to a bot that was created in the environment, right? In this case, a bot specific for distributing this specific application. And again, that Neurons bot is ultimately what is triggered from the service request, right? So, once the user has executed that, ultimately, the software is distributed here. The user can check what the status is, but eventually the software will be fully automatically pushed out to the client, right? And then the user can start using it. Of course, they get a notification if the request is fulfilled, and then they know it's there, and they can go on using it, right? Again, this is just one example. You can use it for all kinds of other automation. Bots in general have a variety of use cases that go beyond software distribution, of course. But it's a good example of what is possible now as part of this integration, right?
Peter, just want to mention that we do have several questions in the comments. So
okay, yeah. We'll leave some time. I'll be able to wrap this up very soon. Just a last item around LOB, our line of business area. So again, we were in the process of localizing the different LOB modules. In this release, we provided localization for our HR module, so that's available now in multiple languages. We are working on doing the same for the other modules as well. Made some refinements around the way how we handle HR confidential case submittal and management. The submittal part we had before, that the user can mark a certain case as confidential, which drives who has access to the corresponding HR case. So we made some further refinements around what happens if you remove users in that area, and how that is handled. And then we continue to build out sample portals or sample landing pages for the LOB areas as well. So in this case, in the last release, we delivered a pre-built HR portal. In this release, we delivered a pre-built facilities management portal, right? So that you can use that as a starting point for building out your self-service UI v3 experience for these different line of business organizations, right? Yeah, I think that was it. And again, we touched, I think, on all the things that we mentioned here on the summary slide. And again, that basically allows me to wrap up my presentation portion and then focus on the questions here. Danny, if you have a chance to bring them up, I think it's difficult for me to share both my screen and then review the questions. If you can bring them up.
Or do you mind if I just call them out to you?
Yeah, I could just verbally. I think I can
sure. So the first question here is just around self-service. So some of these questions are kind of similar, but so earlier versions also support custom business objects and my items. So the question was, what's new here in this version 25.2?
Yeah, so if you recall, again, there are a number of new things overall in the self-service UI around responsiveness, accessibility, again, additional localization options. So the UI and aside from the more modern look and feel, so the value of the UI comes from these aspects. Now, the initial phase, as I stated, was about bringing previously existing capabilities of self-service V1 and V3 over into the new UI so that they can take advantage of the new UI, right? So the focus was indeed on bringing these existing use cases over, right? Now that we've done that, we go beyond the few additional values that the UI already delivers, and then we build out additional features. But in a sense, that's right. This option was there before. It was just missing in the self-service UI v3. So some customers were challenged in getting to the newer experience because that use case wasn't covered before.
Thanks for that, Peter. Some general questions around HTML. So some of the changes that were being made. Will there be customization allowed through the system where you're removing customization via HTML? And also around, how do the embedded videos and knowledge-based articles work for HTML support?
Yeah, so this is an area where we continue to look at, right? I just wanted to, again, mention that we did not just randomly forget it. The challenge with no guardrail approach that we had in the past was that you could pretty much submit anything you want, even submit things that have security challenges like iframe, etc. And so we wanted to make sure that we deliver a UI that is secure and that can be rendered in all the different form factors, mobile, screen, etc., etc. And that's why we kind of locked this down a little bit compared to what we allowed before. We continue to look at feedback. In fact, we are working right now on a more comprehensive HTML sanitization capability that gives customers more control over which of the HTML text to strip out and which not. Because in certain scenarios and based on which role, you may want to open it up a bit more and in some cases a bit less, right? So ultimately, we want to give our customers more control over what you consider secure and whatnot, right? So there will be more work in this area. We also collect feedback again around limited, enhancements like making a label bold or not. We could probably support to a certain degree. We just initially want to make sure we're not leaving out everything that's open because it had, again, usability and security challenges, right? But again, there's more to come in that area, both in the platform, because we know sometimes HTML is needed for experience like knowledge articles. But on the other hand, we wanted to ensure that you have the controls and we're not want to introduce any security risks, right? So more to come in that area. This reflects again where we stand today, but you'll see very soon in an upcoming release, for example, we give further refinements in that area so that you can control which ones will be stripped out and which not.
Awesome. Thanks for that overall answer to that question, Peter. Appreciate that. And so just lastly around self-service, when will the form builder be available for self-service v3? And so just to mention some of these questions, we'll have a to you directly on these. So if we didn't answer your question here live, we will follow up on those as well. So yeah, this one's around form builder v3.
Can you repeat the question? I'm not sure I understood it.
Yeah, they're just wondering when the form builder will be available for self-service v3 to design actual forms. I think it's regarding.
Yeah, so I think this goes back to the demo we showed, right? And again, I'm not sure whether I timed out by now. Let me just try and bring this up again. So again, in the past, you could basically use our standard form builder to build pretty much anything you want and hook it in the self-service UI. That is possible now, but again, you basically show the same layout as you had before. We will provide, as part of our analyst UI, a full form UI builder that basically reflects a more modern look and feel of these kind of forms. That is planned probably towards the end of the year, early next year. We should have something initially. Our analyst UI focuses on the grid views, but then once that's done, we start working on on the individual detailed view. So this we have designs for how these grid views look like. Some of you may have attended roadmap sessions, probably have seen this already. So this is definitely something that's in work right now at the UX level, soon also in the actual implementation. And again, my estimate, this would be coming sometime, end of this year, early next year. We typically across the analyst UI expect a kind of a phased rollout. This is an important UI for our customers. And so we wanted to do the validation and will likely roll this out in phases. I don't want to be clear. That's why it's sometimes hard to put a specific date on it.
Some questions around AI, Peter, that I want to get answered as well. So just in general, would incident correlation AI be available for other business objects, such as event correlation, rather than incidents?
So right now it's focused on incidents. And again, the use case that, something is kind of broken, some shared service, some shared application, and then multiple incidents come in, that typically works for incidents, requests, and HR cases, and many other objects wouldn't quite work off the same premise, so to speak. So right now it's incident focus, because that's a key use case here. We don't focus right now on the event correlation. There's a lot more additional things that we plan to look at for this incident correlation that probably deliver more value. Even, right now we focus, for example, on new ones. You could also try and implement a capability to cluster resolved ones, and then, pull out knowledge, articles out of those, understand where most of the work is spent in the past, let's say 3 months or a year, drive automation, prioritization, based on that information. So there's a lot more value that I believe we can draw from doing this for incidents versus events that are not widely used, at least today. I think a lot more customers could get value out of the incident correlation piece.
Is it still only available for cloud deployments? Any plans on access for Germany or Ireland?
So first of all, yes, our ITSM capability in general are cloud-centric because we rely on cloud services. Some of this, again, goes out into Microsoft Azure OpenAI, for example, right? So this is largely a cloud-centric solution. We do support this in EU data centers now. This is something that has changed recently. We were able to support it before, but the data would go to an AI service in a different non-EU location. Now we're able to take advantage of a Microsoft offering to offer it within EU locations. So this is addressed by now.
And I think so we are a minute over our time, Peter, but if we could just answer one last question around FedRAMP. We have several customers here that are curious. When will the AI features be available to FedRAMP? And in general, are there capabilities we discussed today that won't be available in FedRAMP?
So yeah, FedRAMP is always a bit tricky because, again, any underlying service that we use would have to be FedRAMP enabled as well, and we'd have to go through the assessment. So again, right now we do have limitations in the FedRAMP space as well because, again, we rely here on other services. We generally want to do a better job at communicating which of the features apply to FedRAMP and which not, to give more transparency around that. And right now, that's the focus that we have in this area, to give our customers more transparency around what is included in the FedRAMP service and whatnot. But again, AI has limitations because we are relying on external services here, and we haven't gone through the full assessment in that area. Okay, yeah, I want to be respectful to everybody's time, and again, really thank you again for joining here. Just bringing up the summary slide again to make sure that we can wrap this up. Again, lots of valuable enhancements around this. As I stated, a big portion is not even visible, so to speak, in that a big portion of the investment went into the platform and technology updates. That's an important one. Other than that, again, if you have questions, there's always a way to reach out. We'll be happy to answer those. And otherwise, thank you for joining today. And yeah, looking forward to seeing many of you at the Ivanti Live events. Right? Thank you.